So we have a fan club here. So,
Okay.
how are you guys?
Good.
Doing great.
Yeah, thank you
Happy
for
to
having
be with
us.
you,
Yes,
and time is flying. Last time we met, it was in Riyadh in October.
that's right.
But I would like to start first by asking
this
you a
one's-
question. What has changed in your perspective for
this?
the past 2-3 years? Before we talk about your business.
A lot's changed. I mean, when you used to come to
Right, let's go out here and
conferences
let snow.
2 or 3 years ago, corporate leaders would talk about how they have Native American lesbians on their board and that Exxon should get out of fossil fuels. So the culture's definitely changed at conferences quite a bit. And now Don and I talk about patriotic capitalism. So I say that's a pretty big shift. Do you agree?
100%. I mean, the world has dynamically shifted. People are no longer following the woke agenda of globalism. They're understanding that capital makes sense. We're controlling our supply chains for the first time. We've realized that 50 years of total disregard to that, that some of the bad actors that we sent those jobs really, the American dream was our biggest export for decades. And so bringing that back to the United States, making sure we control that, I think it's been beneficial, not just for us as a business, but for the world.
Let's talk about 1789 Capital. My God, first time we met, you were managing 300 million. Now you are close to 3 billion. Plus. We talk later about the portfolio. Do you have any magic touch here to go so fast? What is the key of the success for you guys?
Well, I mean, I think the thing to understand is that we're thematic investors, and Don and I have been doing a lot of this together, speaking, but for a long time, all the way dating back to 2020. So when we thought of the idea, we were certainly, as I was joking earlier, not in favor. But I think that one thing to understand about our investment philosophy that now spans growth equity, real estate, special situations, is that we are very much thematic investors. And I think we were able to identify shifts in culture and politics a lot earlier than other people. And just like a macro investor in public markets invests based on what's going on geopolitically, we invest based on a thematic thesis that we have. And we started expressing that through working together back in 2021. I remember all the way back to October of 2020, he and I penned an op-ed that you can find online, where we were probably the first folks publicly to call for a ban of TikTok 4 or 5 years before that became in vogue. And we're trying to provide American solutions because of this threat we saw emanating from China. And the most troubling aspect about that was that so many of our corporations in the United States were complicit in that they were benefiting from America's rule of law, and yet taking funds and putting into a country that was certainly becoming our adversary. And so when you ask about our magic touch, it's that within politics, we started backing people that other people didn't see where the wind was blowing. We hosted J.D. Vance's first fundraiser back in 2022, when I think he was polling 5th.
He was number 5th in a Ohio Republican Senate primary, and we think we recognized the talent. And I think that's perhaps what we do differently. We understand those trends quickly, but more importantly than that, because I imagine so many of the people in the room probably see those trends, we were actually willing to act on them when they weren't popular. For me and our businesses, before that, it was actually almost a jailable offense, or at least they would try. So we had the guts to actually go after these things that made sense, to try to bring common sense back into investing. And I think it gave us a lot of credibility with the world. And so I think that was a big factor in our growth. People saw us doing this when, again, it was not popular. We're continuing that thread. Other people seem to, they jump in, they see where the political winds are, and maybe they're here today, but they may not be again in a couple weeks or a couple years. We have that consistent thread that we're going to stay there with our ideology.
Yeah, and I think one anecdote on that, to bring it back to our portfolio, would be an example of a company that a lot of people know about.
In terms of portfolio,
Poly Market, yeah.
I want to.
We got to get the pitch in there early, Richard.
Right. That's why I was trying to get the pitch before he
Get the
did it.
pitch in, Omeed. Come on, what's going on?
About portfolio, I'm so impressed because you are almost investing in all leading private technology companies: Databricks, Anduril, Ramp, Grok, Cruiserway, SpaceX, Polymarket, and many more. So.
Yeah, I think each one of those represents, again, a certain theme that I want to go into today, because I think that's what this audience is interested in. But one thing I'd point out, just to close the loop on kind of the magic touch, as you put it, or the foresight, would be an example of a company called Polymarket that a lot of people know about now. But when we met Polymarket, this was before the election had even happened. It was actually during the campaign. And it was that sense that we felt that polling was not something that could be trusted. Don points out the great example of Iowa, where they had a pollster who said that Kamala Harris was going to win. We knew that that was not true, but it was meant to demoralize. So many of the pollsters were hired mercenaries, and folks were looking for truth. And we thought the way that Polymarket and other prediction markets were acting was an innovative way to try to search for that. And that's why we got into that company way before it was a mainstream idea.
Yeah, it wasn't just sexy. It actually served a utility. The utility was essentially democratizing truth. That was something that was missing. Obviously, we're invested heavily in XAI. We were approached by some of the other big AI companies that everyone knows about, and everyone, frankly, would love to be on the cap table of purely from a financial standpoint. We actually said no because we didn't believe in the thesis. Woke AI to me is more dangerous than woke internet, more dangerous than woke media, because ultimately it will program people to think a certain way in a way that they're not even recognizing. When you turn on the news or you see academia and you had a rainbow hair teacher, you can probably start saying, okay, I know where they stand, I understand where the bias is. AI is going to be so intelligent that it's going to be able to manipulate people and propagandize ideas in a way that people won't even recognize until it's too late. And so we were very ideological at the expense of, probably billions of dollars, but it makes sense to make sure that that truth remains, that it is not taken over by one side of the political spectrum.
What happened with Anthropic?
Well, it's public now, so the Wall Street Journal reported on it. But what happened there is, I think, exactly what Don's talking about. I get entertained by people who think that somehow this is a Johnny-come-lately entity. It's actually just the opposite. We've proven time and time again that we were willing to do things when it was not popular. And because we predicted where the winds were changing, now we're in a position where I think we've been vindicated. The Anthropic example, I think, is notable because it's a microcosm for the broader issue I'm describing, which is, in this case, we were approached to potentially invest in the company. But what it exemplifies and why we turned it down was you had a company here who, in our mind, had the audacity to think that you had the right to be a service provider of the Department of War, but not actually act in the benefit of what the Department of War wanted you to do by utilizing its term of service. And to me, that's a completely antiquated way of thinking. We have a historical issue with technology. Many companies historically would not want to work with the US government, but we're happy to do business with China. That stuff has to end. Thankfully, I think the culture's caught up with it. We were one of the first venture capital firms to really go into defense tech, which has now become a household sector that everybody knows about. But again, we were doing it during the Biden administration when it wasn't popular. In the Anthropic example, we did our due diligence and did not believe that the management team had the kind of values that we thought were appropriate. And ultimately, I think, again, we're vindicated in their behavior with the US government. And to Don's point, I think there are plenty of other options out there in AI. One of them is a company besides XI, which we're invested in, is called Reflection AI. This issue with Anthropic creates a broader point around open weight versus closed weight models. If you are a sovereign as a state or even a large enterprise that's regulated, it's very dangerous having all of your data off-prem. America needs to have open weight solutions. The ones that most people here are using or know about that are open weight are out of China, which goes back to how I started this conversation. So most people here heard about a company called DeepSeek. What I see playing out here is the same controversy we had around 5G with Huawei a few years ago. You simply cannot have Chinese technology be at the foundation layer for our government or important industries. And so we backed a company called Reflection AI with NVIDIA, DST, and a few other prominent companies. They just announced another round, which we're also participating in at $26 billion, where we believe that Reflection AI will become that American open weight model that we so badly need.
Let's talk about real estate, which is one of your core expertise, Don. Yeah. So your 1789 real estate fund raised $1 billion in less than 3 months, so which is one of the fastest paths to $1 billion owner for any inaugural real estate fund in history. So is it thanks to your DNA?
I think it is. We took a little bit of a journey into politics for a few years, but ultimately to be able to bring it back to real estate made so much sense. And it's really a bifurcated approach. Obviously, as a former citizen of New York City, political refugee to the free state of Florida from the People's Republic of New York, we saw the opportunity, but it wasn't just for us and what has happened in Florida real estate. It's going to be the continuation of that as the baby boomers start retiring, that migration from the Rust Belt to the Sun Belt makes so much sense. You see the growth, we have the opportunities, we partner with some of the best developers in the area to be able to capitalize on that in terms of luxury real estate, the health and wellness component that's really being amenitized into real estate from a luxury development. But also we have a bifurcated approach where so many of our portfolio companies are actually dependent on the real estate side of things. They run data centers, they're running AI, they're doing compute, whatever it may be. They don't want to deal with the real estate. So we have actually the teams in-house to be able to do that and build the real estate for them, where we would do 15-year triple net type leases, take care of the real estate component. And unlike a lot of the real estate funds, we're actually doing that in-house, the developments in-house. So it's not just, hey, you're investing with this, who's the manager going to be? Well, we'll tell you when we have the deal. We're actually doing that all in-house. So it's a really interesting approach because it's very divergent, but it creates a great sense of diversity and also really capitalize on that same thing. Focused on red states, places where things can get done, environments that are friendly to business, not overly regulated, not taxed to death. And so for me, just very excited to be able to go back into the space that I really grew up in my whole life.
You are becoming almost the gateway for Invest in America, guys. So can you tell us more about where do you see the opportunities? How far are you going now with this concept of investing in America?
Well, I mean, I think it's key. As you see, there's a lot of geopolitical issues that are happening in the world right now. America remains, I think, the safe haven of assets. Everybody around the world wants to invest in America, and I think that's proven out again and again. When I say that we're investing in the most innovative companies in America, I therefore mean the world, because America is a unique country in that often if you look around the world, you have countries that have natural resources or some geographical advantage, but they haven't really innovated as a result of that. America is unique in that we have these natural resources, geographical advantages, and we're innovative at the same time. I've seen now, because of leadership, we've been able to do that. Saudi Arabia and some of the Gulf countries have done that too, with strong leadership and natural resources. You see that's a very formidable combination. And so I think foreign direct investment in the United States has become a staple of this administration. The president has successfully, through the use of tariffs and other diplomacy, acquired almost $9 trillion over the next 10 years of foreign direct investment, which is just so critical and part of the overall economic agenda that we very much support in the private sector.
Last question about 1789 after we talk about something else. It's not an only two-man show, correct? Because I see each time I meet you guys, you introduce me to new colleagues.
We get to be the dancing monkeys on the stage, but the team is very formidable, 100 years of Wall Street experience. A lot of people also, frankly, that wanted to do something ideological. They got stuck in the big banks and they had to conform to a set of rules that never made sense to anyone. Here we gave them that freedom. It was actually very difficult for me when we started doing this thing. I came from a world of real estate. We were building in urban environments, definitely left-leaning. We were in hotels. You want to cater to the 100% of the market. And all of a sudden you get into the political game a little bit. Even just voicing your opinion was enough to basically ostracize 50% of your market. That was really scary at first, but what we realized once we committed to that, so many other people actually had that ideology. You had to open the door for them to make it okay, and we realized very quickly it was actually, much better perceptually to be a king to 50% of the world or 50% of the market than agnostic to 100%. Not very intuitive for someone came from my background, certainly Omeed from a big bank perspective, but it actually worked. People got it, they understood, and that ideology really was enabled us to bring in the best of the best across that spectrum and enabled the growth that we've had.
We have over 24 employees. As I said, we have over $3 billion in our management, but we have over 33 portfolio companies on the growth equity fund alone. We've allocated over $1 billion already. We are extremely active. Our team comes from Wall Street, lawyers, public market investors, private market investors. We have a best-in-class institutional platform. And it's exactly to Don's point, when you had the largest corporations in America during that woke period, basically acting as thought police and indoctrination centers for their employees, it made sense that if you provided them a solution or an offering where they could just focus on doing work and not being in some version of 1984, that might be interesting. And so that's why we get inundated with CVs and resumes all the time, and I think it's going to be probably the easiest thing we do is talent acquisition.
Don, Do you think that today capital is following politics, or is politics now chasing capital?
I think capital is following politics. You see that in terms of deregulation. You see that in the ability to conduct business. I mean, we basically did everything possible over the last administration to make sure that capital wasn't coming to America. Whether you look at innovative technologies, you look at just crypto. People wanted to be based in America. They wanted to do that. They didn't have a framework by which to even function. I mean, to me, that's ultimately going to be the future of finance. And I don't just mean Bitcoin or Ethereum. I mean, stable coins, the transactional side of that, the utility derived therefrom. All of that was there, and yet we were sending that to basically third world nations that may not share our ideology, may not share our ability to regulate properly and make sure that things are done well, and yet we basically forced them. When we got into that game, and we didn't get into the game because we were innovators in that, like all the things we're talking about, we got in out of necessity. We were debanked. We were thrown off of every major platform in the world. We woke up one day with 300 bank accounts gone, and we said, we have to come up with a solution. We don't just crawl into the corner, put our thumb in our mouth and cry for mommy like so many of the people in government that were going after us with lawfare would have wanted. We decided we're going to utilize our platform, which is also very big, to be able to speak up about this, our balance sheet, to start something new. And yet you could go to the greatest white shoe law firms in New York and say, hey, this is what we want to do. Oh, that makes a lot of sense. That's wonderful. Well, we don't know if you're going to go to jail or not because there's nothing there. And so creating a regulatory environment that is favorable towards investment, favorable towards utilizing the resources that we had in the ground, whether we talk about rare earth minerals, whether you talk about oil and gas. But for some reason, we were unwilling to do it. You saw Joe Biden killed the Keystone Pipeline, and basically his first executive order when he took over, he said he wasn't going to do it 3 weeks before that in a debate, didn't matter. They killed that. And instead, we're importing oil from Iran, the world's leading state sponsor of terror, and Venezuela, a regime we didn't even recognize when we had it in the ground, when we were able to create great jobs for hardworking Americans. It's insanity, Richard. So having a regulatory environment brings that capital in, and now that we understand the critical importance of those supply chains and not just saving 0.2 cents on a widget by sending things that were literally critical to that supply chain to people who don't necessarily share our interests and in many cases would be considered enemies by any way, shape, or form, bringing that all back into America, I think creates an incredible opportunity for the future.
The hypocrisy knows no bounds. I mean, I want to pick up on a point. First of all, I think it goes culture, politics, then finance. So the money flows in that order. But if you look at the previous administration, or the Obama administration for that matter, it's kind of funny how they say, oh, well, this administration is taking such an active role in investing in industry. What are they talking about? When they were there, they were running a Green New Deal scam and investing in EVs, getting us out of fossil fuels, while at the same time thinking they were doing something for the environment when China and India were allowed to pollute as they saw fit. It was like absolutely insane. And on the other end of the spectrum, you have the Trump administration that actually has the foresight to see, we've spent 25 years outsourcing industry that is imperative for national security. We cannot make our pharmaceuticals in China. We saw that during COVID. That has to come home. You cannot give the entire rare earth market, 90% of it, to China. We have to invest in these companies. And so if private capital wants to invest in those sectors as well, we should be encouraging that, not investing in things like Solyndra that go bankrupt for Obama donors.
Well, we dealt with it. I dealt with it this week. We invested in a company called Vulcan Elements doing rare earth mineral stuff for magnets that you need for our military infrastructure. Democrats this week wanted to subpoena me and because we invested in an American company that does rare earth minerals. There are not many
with a dozen
them.
other institutional investors, by the way, just to be
correct.
Clear. Great.
By the way, also took a loan under the Biden DOD. All of these things, it doesn't matter because we saw the critical importance of it, because it's so limited in America. We had the guts to fund that. They want to go after me. They want to go after us, not the people who basically spent 50 years making us dependent on China. Exactly. I mean, who's the criminal here? I mean, it's absolute insanity, but we're used to that, right? We've seen that. We saw it with Russia. I'm sure that cycle will go again, and they'll keep trying. But there is a difference between the truth and the narrative. It's just not often disseminated to the people.
Where do you see the smartest capital moving in the next 5 years?
For me, I think, and I think Don agrees on this, is that we've all been talked to death about AI. It's an incredible time period, and trust me, we're huge investors in AI. I think that's going to create an enormous amount of productivity and be a part of a real boom, almost a new industrial revolution, a technological revolution that we're at this cusp of. We should be very excited about what's going to come of that. But for me, none of this happens without energy. And so one of the biggest exposures I think we have as a country in the United States is our grid, electrical grid. And so we've seen a couple ways to play that. One is we invested in a company called Base Power, which tries to utilize the grid in a way that it saves a lot of the energy during off-peak hours. So that's one innovative solution. We need to do more, but that's a private sector minor solution that we've invested in. And then with the electrical grids or these kinds of hyperscalers and data centers writ large, which obviously put pressure on it, it's not a foregone conclusion that every state wants one of these in there. And so it's become kind of a political issue. And so we're big investors in SpaceX, where Elon is probably the only person who could try to send these data centers into space and try to create solar power that way. That, I think, will be the largest IPO in history later this year, potentially a couple of trillion. But I do think that it is what Don said earlier, regulation and the political climate is going to be the difference as to whether we make it or not. You see it in AI right now. The president put out a great plan, one set of rules for AI in America. How do you ever think you're going to take on China, which is a central planner in AI, if you have 100 different 50 different states doing 100 different types of regulations on AI? You've got to have one. It's a national security issue.
Energy is everything. Obviously, AI is a little sexier right now. Quantum's going to be incredibly sexy. None of it functions without energy. And if you look at us relative to China, their focus has been on the energy. You can have the greatest AI, you can have the greatest algorithms, you can have the greatest. If you don't have the energy to power it, none of it matters. So it's probably, if there's 10 or 12 major AI players, there's going to be 3 or 4 that end up winning. The one thing that they're all going to need ultimately is energy, and I think that's probably the safer, conservative bet for everything. Because whether it's AI, whether it's the other things I mentioned, they're all going to be dependent on power, and we need a lot more of it.
Last question: what is your definition of leadership?
Of what?
Leadership.
Strength. Just the ability to do what is required when it's required. I see that a lot, with my father. The difference is we live in an American, in our system, and it's the greatest system ever created. And yet we have people that make trillion-dollar decisions that have no business making those decisions in the first place, but they're making them to win an election in 2 weeks at the expense of our children and grandchildren's futures. He's one of the few people that has the ability to make the decision that says, hey, this may be a little tough right now, but in 50 years, 20 years, it's going to pay the dividends that we need. And so the ability to do that against the political grain, I think, is the fundamental thing that's going to separate this administration from others. It may not always feel great at the moment, but I think history will look kindly on those who are able to make those long-term decisions, as difficult as it may be at the time.
I just want to, yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more with Don. I obviously said that a few times, but I do think that has been the difference. If you look throughout history, countries with similar GDPs at the outset or their inception, the difference maker, Libya and Singapore had the same GDP at one point. What's the difference there? One country has a resource that everybody wants, the other doesn't. It has to be leadership. And, we see that in America right now, which is why this is such a critical period when you have a strong military, energy, and a strong leader. We have to take advantage of this time in the private sector and come together. And just want to thank you and FII and obviously PIF and everybody from Saudi Arabia for putting together such a great conference that brings all of these intelligent people together. It's really a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Before you leave, Don, do you talk business with your father?
I don't. Frankly, it's interesting because I did my whole life very much understand the way he thinks, but right now, he's taken that job so seriously. He understands the importance of it. Building a billion-dollar building is no longer exciting for him when you're doing trillion-dollar decisions, each and every day. He didn't need this job, Richard. Frankly, there are many a times when I'm, in the crosshairs of the insane people in our government, saying, we probably didn't need this either. But there comes a time where someone does actually have to step up when they see the mistakes that are being made. You've watched him since 1984 talking about failed trade practices, talking about that exporting of the American dream at the expense of our middle class. To have him step in the game, as brutal as that has been, he understands the magnitude of that, and he couldn't care less about business, frankly. The business is really what's good for America, and that's running a big business.
We are looking forward to hear from the president later today, so we hope to see you again later. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for Omeed Malik and Donald Trump Jr. Thank you.